Hello everyone, Burb here. It's about 1 a.m. in a hotel room. I am traveling for vacation, so if the audio quality is a little bit different, we will be back to normal in about a week, so please bear with me. Today I'd like to talk about how my late surges have been doing in room matches as well as just general testing. It has honestly not been as good as I have hoped. Part of it is because my builds are not 100% optimized, but the other half of it is I believe that Aquarius Cup has some unique challenges for late surgers that can be mitigated, and we will go through those mitigations, but require some additional thought. I don't believe late surging is as easy as people are saying. It's very easy to hit the baseline, but I believe that the top 1% of, front runner and pace chaser players just kind of win. There are ways for us to fight against that, though. As late surgers always, and this is part of the charm that I really enjoy, we can always high roll. Sometimes we miss, a lot of times we miss, but sometimes we can hit everything perfectly and beat pretty much every build in the game. So, without further ado, let's talk about late surgers and Aquarius Cup. This is the track we will be referencing. This is the Tokyo 1600 meter dirt track. And essentially there's two major problems with CM. The first of them is not really unique to this track. There's just no real consistent acceleration. And yes, Let's Pump Some Iron exists. I will talk about how that isn't really very consistent right now in this particular track. In addition, the bigger one is that it's incredibly difficult to actually push up in the pack early. And because of this, it's normally at least gives us a chance to be on par with the other rolls, but because we don't have a consistent acceleration and we're not pushing really forward in the mid-race, it's very difficult to win because we are usually behind the general pack as well as having to high roll an acceleration. So with full transparency, that list was a little bit longer. There was a couple more options, and then I really, most of it was based off the fact that this current uphill here basically just cuts base acceleration. So if you don't know, this uphill changes your base acceleration value from 0.006 to 0.004, so about a 25% reduction. However, because really honestly the difference between late surger acceleration and pace chaser acceleration is 0.4%, it's like a loss of 3 power. So boo-hoo, I don't think this really does much. However, this just really kind of showed me that, hey, power is about 25% less relevant compared to Excel skills right now. And the reason being is that Excel skills, they are an additive component. So if you get, 0.2 Excel, it just adds 0.2. If you have power, it's a logarithmic relationship that is multiplied to your base acceleration. So because the base acceleration is much lower because the Excel zone has that uphill for 95% of it, your power is not really doing as much as normal. That being said, power is still very much required because it does lower your target max speed, but honestly, the biggest problem is that it's really tough to push forward in the mid-race. Normally, this is the strategy coefficient that you can find on the wiki. Normally, basically, front runners just have a big advantage with pace down mode in the position keep, and then after that, the middle leg speed that late surgers and end closers have, the gamblers have, should be able to at least give them a chance to push back into parity with the front runners. Because this track only has 400 meters worth of mid-race and the position keep is just ridiculously long, it's like 533, it's just impossible to actually get back to the front again. You can high roll with Umastan and stuff if you're lucky, or straight skills if you PDM break, but besides that, yeah, even though late surgers have a ridiculous amount of mid-race speed skills, it's really tough to actually get forward in the pack. And what that does is it basically the standard combo of Let's Pump Some Iron into Redshift into Give Mummy a Hug, 654, you can't even get into 6th all the time because this is a pretty front and pace heavy CM in my opinion. I think a lot of people are running triple front or double front because they're trying to basically counter Taiki Shuttle or trying to counter VPP plus something else on other front runners and pace chasers. That combined with the fact that the late surgers can't really pass the front runners means that sometimes your 6th place is just going to be dead. So Let's Pump Some Iron is not really that reliable, and even when it hits, there is a very, very small window for this to hit. So normally, let's just say this is not a CM track, but Tokyo's 2300 meter, the spurt is right on the final corner, and so basically it can proc here, but also if you're not exactly in 6th place and you hit, let's say, like an on your left really quickly early, and you go from 7th to 6th, it still gives you let's pump some iron on the way. So like you have all this time, and it basically translates into that the skill is normally like closer to an on your left style excel for passing into 6. So it works as a secondary acceleration as well as being a primary acceleration if you happen to be in 6. In this track, because the corner on the late race is only like 65 meters, if you're not in 6, you ain't getting the skill. So it's only a primary acceleration. There's no way for you to pass into 6th place because you're already on the final straight. And that really gives this skill trouble, because this is basically, at this point, this is feast or famine. You're either going to have a really good skill that pretty much is angling and scheming, it's 0.2, or it's just not going to proc and you wasted 160 skill points. So this skill, even though it looks like relatively consistent when you're in the right position, it's just like with the current state of how it's so pace and front heavy, you got to get really lucky on mid-race speed skills. And you can still build around this. You can still build ridiculously high wit plus a bunch of mid-race speed skills, and you give yourself a chance of hitting 6th place. So what are we left with? We're left with a bunch of inconsistent, on your left style timing-based accelerations, and there's a ton of them. This is like their strength, and honestly, you should be picking like 3 to 4 of these if you can manage it. I'm going to compare this. This is just sort of a napkin math study, so please bear with me. Just compare this to just having like a guaranteed like angling and skimming. So this is what late searchers have to do to reach parity with front runners angling and skimming. And I understand, one, that they have a higher max speed, so it's pretty hard to model. You don't necessarily need to get all the lengths back just from your acceleration skill. And 2, I completely understand that as well in the other direction, that they hang about 6 to 8 lengths behind the leader in the position keep, and you can usually make about 3 or 4 lengths back on that, so you're still having to get like another 3 to 5 lengths in addition to it. But I'm going to just look at these skills compared to just being at parity with the front runner that actually hits angling and scheming. So first of all, let's pump some iron technically is about the same as angling and scheming, so if you do hit 6th place, you are back at parity right there. Furious feet. I'm using a simplification where essentially, ignore this, that's area. I'm essentially just considering this a triangle, because really that's what it is. So if it procs early, you get 7.32 lengths, and if it procs late, you get 0 lengths, let's say. It seems like right now it's first half of, I think this is the 1.5 anniversary stuff that changed all the skills to first half of the late race rather than the entirety of the late race. If that's wrong, the math completely goes out of favor for late searchers. So basically this is a generous one at the worst and a accurate one at best, right? If we make this a triangle, because it really is, so if it procs later, you're just getting less lengths. It's as simple as that. We essentially just have a triangle where our maximum effectiveness is 7.32, and because it's from, the spurt starts at 1066 and ends at 1600, half of that is 1333, and so basically we are looking for the point at which we actually surpass the 3.35 threshold that angling and scheming has. This base is 267 meters as the half of the late race that this actually is able to proc on, and basically the math is simple. It's for as long as this is a straight line, which is what we are assuming. I understand that it's maybe a little bit quadratic here, but if we assume it's a straight line for simplicity reasons, because honestly the linear fit is not too far off from the parabolic fit, we essentially just need the total height or the maximum height of our triangle that we've given, and we subtract from it our threshold, and then we divide it by the total height again, because essentially we are trying to find the base of this triangle here. So we are trying to find the percentage amount of proc time that this is better than angling and scheming, which is this horizontal image. This is really like a one-dimensional problem. We are only finding the base of this triangle. So we've made this triangle here, compared it to this big triangle. And you can prove this through Pythagoras, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. If you know these two, you can find these two. If you know these two, you can find these two. You can also just say that, hey, the slope of the line is y equals mx plus b. If the slope is the same for both, the slope cancels out. So you don't really care what the slope is. You only care what essentially the height is of it. So there's multiple ways to prove it. It's really mathy, but essentially with Furious Feet, this gold skill, you just take 7.32 as our maximum. You subtract the threshold. You divide it by the height again, the maximum height, and about 54% of the time, Furious Feet is better. And that is why this skill is so good. It's essentially a 50-50 chance of being better than a standard guaranteed proc. And there's nothing you got to do about it. It just picks a random point for you. So Furious Feet, very, very good skill. Other golds, like On Your Left Lead to Charge, they have a little bit lower duration. And essentially the math is the same thing. It's just 5.96 instead of 7.32. And you find that these are 43% better instead of 52% better. I'm going to grab some water. It's really hard to talk when you're laying down on a bed in a hotel room, to be honest. So you got 54% versus 43%. That's the difference between 1.8 seconds and, the 3 seconds that Furious Feet gives. No stopping me. I'm not even going to talk about this one. This is a future video. It really only can be modeled empirically because it's like Let's Pump Some Iron. Like, how often are you going to be in 6th place? How often are you going to be blocked? It's really, really difficult to model that. Otherwise, it's there, and you can just place a percentage that you think that this works, and that can kind of work in this scenario. I'm not really going to talk about it this one. Most of the white excels, they just have a lower upside. They only give 4 lengths-ish rather than the 7 lengths that the other ones give. So it's just 4.29 minus 3.35 over 4.29. Most white skills are better than angling and scheming about 21.9% of the time. That's updrafters, that's forward march. Technically, slick surge is a little bit worse. It's about 16, but honestly, at this point, it doesn't really matter. And also On Your Left is probably the easiest of the 3 to grab because it's on Nice Nature Wit. So your odds as a late surger of having at least one better skill than angling and scheming, if you have On Your Left, updrafters, and forward march. So 2 whites and a gold that isn't Furious Feet. I think this is very reasonable to have. You have a gold and 2 whites. You take 43%, 21.9%, 21.9%. The probability of none of these happening is the failure chance for all of these, so you just subtract them from 1. So 1 minus 0.43, 0.219, 0.219. And you get, when you multiply all 3 of those together, that there's a 34.7% chance of failure and being worse than angling and scheming. So 65% of the time, you will be better than angling and scheming. I have to give some props to that Japanese guy that makes videos, because he said specifically and that you need 4 acceleration skills on gamblers this time, specifically late surgers. And that seems to be kind of right, because 3 gives 65%, 4 is going to increase this to about 70 to 75% in general. What this doesn't take into account is, of course, multiple acceleration procs from the front runners and other roles. And also the 3 to 6 lengths that you generally have to make up as a late surge compared to fronts. The problem is with this is when you proc multiple accelerations, it basically lowers the amount of time that these are actually valid. So imagine you proc On Your Left, and then like another 7 seconds later, you would proc Furious Feet. You're already going to be at max speed because you basically increase the slope of this line. So you're making the timing even tighter. So procking like multiple excels and having to proc multiple cells to compete with like VPP plus angling and scheming, it gets really tough real quickly, and the percentages go way down after that. And so is all hope lost? Is there any chance to beat the other roles? Well, there's ways that we can adjust to still beat the other roles. And here are some ways you can mitigate it. First of all, run more mid-race and late-race speed skills. By running more mid and late-race speed skills, especially late-race speed skills, because you can't really get blocked. I mean, if you get blocked in the late race, you're just dead anyways, right? So if you get blocked in the mid-race, I mean, it's like bad, but fine, but the run's not lost. So if you just pick some mid and late race speed skills, you're essentially lowering the burden that's actually on these skills to make up lengths. So if you really think about it, if instead of having to go for 3.5 lengths, you only have to go for 2 lengths, well, all of a sudden you've just added like an additional 25% chance to every single white skill. And this adds additively. So Excel skills, like I said, get less effective as more skills proc because the timing, like the timing is tighter the more accels you proc. Speed skills just purely add to each other. So as long as they're procking outside of the acceleration zone, because we're assuming you're hitting your acceleration, because if you don't hit an acceleration, your run's dead. They just add on to each other. Like they just get stronger. So the more mid-race and late-race speed skills you're able to incorporate into your build, the less burden your excel skills have to make up the difference. Secondly, pick more acceleration skills. You have more dice, you have more chances to high roll. This has diminishing returns though. Like I said, having like 7 of them is nice, like my El Condorpasa, and that works a lot. She's actually quite consistent, but like I am putting 7 excel skills on a character. Because of, like I said, the early proc excels diminish future excels as we're going on. So this is less effective, I think, as making a balanced UMA of like 4 and 4, right? 4 mid-race or late race plus 4 acceleration skills, rather than just putting 7 and 0. Just make sure your UMA is still balanced, but this is also a method, is just get more dice. 3, just build more gamblers. And I think this is the least consistent one because, hey, you're setting the average position of the pack backwards. If you're running like 2 enclosures and a late surger, the odds that at least one of your gamblers is going to be in 6th place is a lot higher than if you're running like double pace chaser, 1 late surger. The problem with this is that really only one can reliably win. Only one's going to be in 6th position, and so if you only put Let's Pump Some Iron on one of them, you have the problem that may not be the one that's in 6th place. And if you put them on all 3, well, 2 of them have just picked a skill that doesn't really work. So running multiple late surgers or end closers, as much as I like late surgers, it just seems really inconsistent this time because like you're adding more dice, but you're only giving yourself 1 chance out of your 3 to really take advantage of those position-based excels. So take that into consideration. It's not bad to run multiple late surgers. I probably will end up running multiple late surgers because I have the love of the game, but it's probably not the most effective use of positioning. I may do that in another video, but we'll talk about that later. And the fourth, the one I don't like to do the most, but I've actually started to, just because I think it's just super effective, is just build a singular frontrunner. There's gonna be other frontrunners, so you don't have to worry about the double frontrunner thing. Basically, all you're doing is if you can build an absolutely competitive frontrunner that can win, if you're able to take a VPP or an angling scheming proc, not only does your frontrunner have a chance to win, but you're basically lowering the burden that your gamblers have and the number of acceleration skills that they have to proc to counter the acceleration skills of the frontrunners. That goes for pace chasers too. You know, you can run pace chasers like Taiki Shuttle that can late proc their ultimate to just zoom past the frontrunner as well. So as much as I don't like building frontrunners, I've started building them, 1, to learn about them, and 2, because I might just put one in there as a blocker that can actually win. I don't like running like pure blockers that can't win, but if you can make one that can fight the front runners and you lower the chance of A&S proccing, you don't have to fight against the consistent acceleration. And angling and scheming has such a high duration compared to straightaway spurt that it's like, straightaway spurt end closers are going to be an issue, right? But at least you can fight them because the skill gives them just a little bit on you, whereas the front runners are already 6 lengths ahead of you at this point. And 5, just accept also that lates will always have a chance to high roll. So again, you run a bunch of lates. I enjoy this part. If you run a bunch of lates, you're gonna, they're triangles. They're not flats. If it's better than angling and scheming, it can be 3 times better than angling and scheming, right? Like updrafters can be, it can just give you 6 lengths. It's ridiculous. It can just be 2 angling and scheming procs on its own. And you can't control that, but getting more of them is very good. So, hey, build with the strengths that late surgers have. That is their accelerations and their late race speed. And hey, we must adapt to beat the other roles. We can't run the same strategy every single CM. This one seems like the mid-race is kind of cooked because it's so short. So let's just try to keep gambling and make sure we utilize the other roles to assist us as late surger players. All in all, final note, again, I keep saying this, all these strategies require a ton more skill points than probably the other roles because we need mid-race speed skills, late race speed skills, and of course our inconsistent accelerations. We need to pick like 4 accelerations, whereas front runners need a lot of skill points in general, but front runners just need angling, scheming, and possibly VPP, and the means of getting to that point. So they have kind of a fixed number of skill points that are useful. I think it's around 2,000. Late starters just keep getting better the more skill points you put on them. So seriously, try to race more and get more skill points. You'll find that you'll have better Umas. All right, just letting you know, again, like this internet in this hotel is absolute garbage. I will try to upload. I have some videos coming out. I am trying to finish both the parent guide as well as the front runner guide for Aquarius. So I hope I can finish all that this week and get them uploaded. I have no idea how long it's going to take to upload this video. So I hope you enjoyed. Burb out.